Hey, welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove. And before we get into this episode, I would just want to remind everybody that if you want to follow us on our socials, that's our Facebook page, From the Shadows. After the Shadows is our forum page, our TikTok page, our Patreon page, everything From the Shadows. Go to our website, fromtheshadows.com or fromtheshadowspodcast.com. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can hit the contact page there, send me an email, especially if you have an experience that you want to share and maybe come on the show and talk about. And if you really want to get a hold of me, you can find me at Shane Grove Author on Instagram. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. So other than that, I think Nita, our social media queen, will be happy that I was short and succinct and telling everybody where they could go to find all the From the Shadows podcast socials. So we have another cool episode with a returning guest, and this might be the quickest that a guest has ever come back on the show. But Mike Mullen is back on the From the Shadows podcast. Mike, welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here.
So Mike was on a couple, I mean, time flies, but it's probably been 6-8 episodes ago, and shared some really great Sasquatch Bigfoot stories and how he kind of got into, into that subject. But off the air, he said, "Hey, I know you guys listen, do some other stuff. I've got some really good haunted house ghost stuff." And you know me, I'm a sucker for haunted house ghost stuff. And so I said, "All right, Mike, you can come back on. I want to hear this. I want to hear what you got." So now with the spotlight back on him, Mike, go ahead. Let's hear your haunted house ghost stories.
Yeah, I'm not a ghost, I'm not a ghost hunter, but throughout my life, I've had a couple things happen, and the first one wasn't really not a whole lot, but the second one's pretty crazy. But I'll start with the first one. When I was probably in junior high, that's when I was talking about the Bigfoot thing, that's when we moved to the dairy farm, and we moved to the farm. We had been there for a while, and the people we leased the dairy farm from an older couple that had owned it for generations, and just a wonderful older couple, and they were still living on the farm and in their old house, and we moved on a double wide mobile home, and then we opened the farm back up and started dairy farming. And what ended up happening is right around Christmas time, the first year we were there, odd things started happening in the barn, and it was like hay bales would you have your back turned and a hay bale would come kind of flying across the barn. Or when you're milking a cow, the gate would open, and that kind of has to be done manually, but it would just open and the cow would walk out. Then one night my dad was upstairs in the barn. A barn's like 2 stories. The upstairs is the hayloft, and the lower part is where the cows feed and rest and that kind of things. And one night my dad was up there and he saw what he described as an apparition floating across the barn. And it really freaked him out. And then not too long after that, we had like every farm does, we have our cats that stay in the barn or the mice and stuff. And we had our farm dogs. Well, the dogs went upstairs into the hayloft and they would not come down. We had to take them food upstairs. We had to take them water upstairs. They just basically started camping. And this always started about a week before Christmas. And it got to the point where it was really strange. So when my dad finally went over to John, which was the guy that owned the farm, and he asked him, he says, "Hey, have you had any problems, like weird things happen around this time of year?" And he says, and he took my dad aside, he says, "Yeah, well, we have." And he was John by this time, he was older. He was probably in his 70s, and he had a son. And this was many, many years prior. I guess he was a wrestler. And at school, back in the day, they didn't have the fancy, exercise equipment that we have now. And he had been taught how to do some exercises with a rope, where you put the rope around your forehead and you use your body weight to strengthen your neck muscle.
Yep.
Well, his son had went up in the barn to do that and ended up accidentally hanging himself a week.
Oh.
Yeah.
So a week before Christmas, he accidentally
hung himself. He was only like 13, 14 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And we were there for many, many years. And so always a week to 2 weeks before Christmas, all the way to about a week after Christmas, we always knew it was going to be crazy. All the animals would go up there. We had to feed and water them. Hay bales would fly around. The cows would get fed when they weren't supposed to. We'd see apparitions floating across the thing. And we always knew it was that kid. And so we just always tried to be nice. But it was pretty insane. Because that's where, TV and anybody was really talking about ghosts,
So why do you think the animals went upstairs? They were was the app?
He must have been he must have loved animals, because they wanted to be up there with him. They didn't want to run from him.
Okay.
They were up there with him.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering. So now, when you guys saw the apparition and your dad saw the apparition, was it up in the haymow or was it down below?
Up in the hay loft where he had hung himself. Yeah.
Holy smokes!
Yeah. One time, if you know what a hay loft, the upstairs of a barn, it'll have holes in the floor that are about 4 feet by 4 feet, and that's where you take the hay and you throw it down below to feed the cows. And one day around Christmas, we got a load of alfalfa in, and alfalfa, they're very heavy bales. These weigh 150, 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have twine to put them together. They have wire. And we had just got a load of alfalfa in, and I was downstairs cleaning up after some cows, and all of a sudden I heard this big boom, and hay went flying everywhere. And I couldn't figure out for a minute, but then I realized that an alfalfa bale had fell through the hole, and it just basically blew up, and hay just went flying everywhere. And I knew nobody else was in the barn but me, so I went upstairs and tried to figure out where the hay bale came from, the alfalfa bale, because the shipment had just come in, and there was one hay bale in a place that came from the middle of the stack. It was about 40 feet away from that hole. So that hay bale had to have been picked up from almost 40 feet.
And look, I've thrown my share of straw and hay, and look, hay bales don't just go flying. Don't go flying.
Yeah.
And if they do go flying, I don't want to see the guy who's on the other end of the throwing, because you got to be a big dude.
Yeah.
You got to be a big, strong dude, or woman,
I know there was a lot of other things that happened in the actual milking parlor, but my dad and my mom were pretty quiet about not saying too much about it to not freak his kids out. We already knew something was going on, but I know a lot more things happened than I even knew about.
So it just seemed like he would show up for the week before, week after, just
it would disappear. It wouldn't happen again until next year. Yep.
So what did the people that owned it, like, did they think it was their son and that he was just?
Oh, they were. Their last name was the Holcombs, and they were salt of the earth people and very, very religious. And so I don't think they ever really said a lot. I don't know if in their mindset a ghost and religion was even acceptable. But he was nice enough to tell us what happened to his son, and it wasn't like he went up and took him, cookies and milk. I never saw that. He kind of ignored it, I think, because I never acknowledged it.
Well, and you're talking about them being very religious, and even though it obviously, well, I guess obviously it was an accident.
Yeah.
You wonder if in some strange way, maybe it got misconstrued that maybe he did it to himself, on purpose.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And so his spirit couldn't rest because.
If it happened, if it happened on accident, he still maybe he still couldn't rest. I mean, being a young kid, and at that age and having something like that happen. I mean, I was a farm boy. I was raised a farm boy. And when you're a farm boy, you can't make mistakes. Mistakes will kill you.
Yeah.
Running equipment and he made a mistake, and it didn't have anything to do with farming, and it killed him. And if that would have been me, I would have had a hard time resting for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think people realize how dangerous it is out on the farm sometimes. I mean, it's gotten a lot safer now, but back in the 60s, 70s, there wasn't a lot. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of, I mean, I know some guys that, I know a guy lost an arm in an auger. I know a guy who almost lost his leg in an auger. And
I got probably 3 or 4 times. I very easily could have died on the farm, no doubt. I just got lucky, and that's a part of farming, Yeah. And this kid, he made a mistake and he didn't get lucky,
Well, hopefully, his spirit at some point maybe found some peace,
Yeah. Actually, one of my best friends from high school, her dad owns our old farm now, and I plan on going out there this summer, and I want to ask them if that stuff still goes on or not. They actually make wine there now.
Oh, really? So is the same barn and everything still there?
Yep, it's all still there. Yeah.
Oh, that would be interesting. Hopefully, it's not a bunch of wine bottles getting thrown around instead of hay bales, right? That.
Really happy ghost now.
There you go. The spirit found his spirits, right? Is that? Oh boy. So as a kid, so you knew then there was some crazy stuff that could happen.
We knew, and like I said, this is before there was like ghost shows on TV. I mean, it was something nobody knew about, but it was. When it first started happening, it was pretty freaky. And we got to the point where, you didn't go out in the barn, after dark, around that time without having somebody with you. I'd make my little brother get his ass out of bed and say, hey, we got to go feed the cows. Normally we yes, I said, not this time of year. You're coming with me, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this is the same barn, right? That you guys had some Bigfoot experiences in too, right?
A little bit, not much. Yeah.
Not much?
Yeah, the Bigfoot was at the first place. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we thing, which was a maybe, Yeah.
So, okay. So you survived this.
Survived this. My next and my last ghost thing is, and this one was kind of nuts. I grew up on a farm. I'm kind of an old soul, so I started off my life going 90 miles an hour pretty early, and I had moved up. I was living in Parkland, Spanaway area of Washington State, and me and my wife were living in this little house, and she got pregnant. So we got married. I was 19, and we had already owned. We weren't married yet, but we had bought our first house when I was 18, and it was a little house. So we decided we were going to need something bigger because we had a family on the way. So we rented out our house, and in Parkland, I can even tell you the address is 1102 South 111th Street. in Parkland. And so we bought this house. It was an older home built in the 60s that had been added on to at some point. And then had a 4-car garage, and above the garage was one huge room. And the people that did it, they had a dance studio. So
Okay.
it was no walls, it was all wide open. And it had a swimming pool in the backyard. But it was just a lot in a neighborhood. It wasn't on property. It was in town, And it was built in the 60s because I had when we first bought it, it had the black and red 3-inch shed carpet and the black toilet and a red soaking tub.
Did it have the intercom system through the house?
Yes. And so we kind of remodeled it before we moved in a little bit. We couldn't afford it much back then. Like I said, I was only 19 years old. And my son, my oldest son, was born. And in the main house, you had the kitchen, and in front of that was the living room. Then off the living room was the master bedroom. It was on the first floor. Then right outside the door was a spiral staircase that went upstairs, and upstairs was a big room, then a door, then a bedroom. So I had 2 rooms upstairs. And so we put when my son was born, we put his bed and stuff upstairs because we could hear it, because we could keep the door open. We could hear if he cried. It was just jump out the door and walk upstairs. And it worked out great. Well, when we first moved in, he hadn't been born yet. But after he was born, we started at nighttime. We wake up and we would hear footsteps upstairs, which was where my son was sleeping. And it was right above our master bedroom. And we'd hear footsteps going from one side to the other. And not when I say the other, I mean to the crib. And then back to the window on the other side of the room. And then back to the crib, then back to the window. And we get up and we go check, thinking maybe the cat was up there or one of our dogs was up there. We never could figure out what was doing it. And you're never thinking ghost, But then we started noticing that the window in that room was always open, at least 3 to 4 inches. And it was one of them ones that it opened horizontally, it slid horizontally, but it was very difficult to open. So you'd shut it and we'd lock it. And the next morning, it would be open 3 or 4 inches. And we knew something was weird, but it kind of just blew it off. And but every night you would hear them footsteps. And it didn't hurt anything, so we just kind of blew it off. And wasn't, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 months after we moved in, me and my wife were going to take a vacation. So my in-laws took our son to babysit. Me and my wife took off down to Mexico for the week. And we had one of our friends stay at the house to watch it. And he left for work one morning. When he got back, in the older homes, in the bedrooms where you have the light fixtures, they have the glass square panel with a nut, that holds it on, and 2 light bulbs.
Oh, yeah.
The old school bed.
Yeah.
Old school bed light fixture,
Mm-hmm.
Well, he got back home from work, and every bedroom in the house, the glass panel was sitting on the bed with the nut and the 2 light bulbs. And every bedroom in the house, they were sitting on top of the bed.
Okay.
Yeah. And kind of freaked out, and he figured, geez, somebody broke in. So he put all the light fixtures back together. Next day, he made sure everything was locked. I got 19. There wasn't a whole lot to steal in that house back then, so we didn't worry about it too much. And he got home from work the next day, and it was all exact same way again. All the glass panels were sitting on the beds. The 2 light bulbs and the little nut was sitting inside there. It freaked him out so bad that he left. He didn't come back. So he's I'm not staying here anymore.
Oh.
We got back. He's never asked me to house sit again. And that was kind of the biggest thing then. A couple of times we'd be sitting at our dining room table, and there was a door that went out to the hallway. I remember one night me and my wife and a couple of friends were sitting there, and the door handle started jiggling, and that came in from the garage. We kind of all looked at it, then all of a sudden the door opened, and I'm waiting for somebody to walk in because I owned a business back then, so a lot of people would come in through the garage, and nobody walked in. So I got up, nobody there. I walked into the garage, nobody was there. The door just opened up all by itself, and that really that spooky made the hair on your arm stand up pretty bad. And
I can imagine.
yeah, like I said, I'm only 19 years old. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So wasn't, I don't know, maybe all these little things like that window always opening up. It just always happened. We just left it open. We didn't worry about it. I'm sorry about the noise. My dog's over there. But anyway, we ended up buying another house, and me being a farm boy, I like living in the city. So not too far away, I bought a little house on 10 acres. And so we decided we were going to rent out that house. And so I rented to a friend of mine that actually worked for me back then. And him and his wife and 3 kids, they moved in. And he was a veteran of the Vietnam War, Green Beret. Hell of a nice guy, but a tough son of a bitch. Well, they lasted about 2 months. He called me and he says, Mike, we get the hell out of here. He says, this house is haunted, and we just can't live here. I says, all right. And then, yeah, I kind of told him, so I kind of knew, but I guess it had escalated a bit. So
did he tell you like some of the stuff that happened?
He never really told me specifics. He just said, I'm getting the hell out of here. So then I ended up running it out on a lease option to buy, which means you set a price, somebody gives you money, they have a year to buy it. So I ended up doing that 3 times, and every time the people said, we are not living in this house. Keep my money. I'm leaving. So everybody kept walking. And so the last time, and this is the scary one, is I ended up renting it to a couple that worked for Boeing, which is the airplane manufacturer up here in Kent. And him and his wife both worked for Boeing. They were both in their mid-30s, and they had 4 daughters. They were like 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. They had popped them out. And I rented to them, and they were there for a year and never said anything. I says, hey, great, we're good. Somebody's actually going to stay at my house. It's wonderful. And then all of a sudden, I get a call from him, and he says, Mike, he says, I'm going to be a little late on my rent this month. I got cancer. I got diagnosed with cancer. I says, geez. I says, don't worry about it. I says, well, we'll get through it. And then a couple months later, I get a call from his wife, and Brian, he had passed away. He had passed away from his cancer. It's 35, 36 years old. And she says, I don't want to do about rent. And I says, I said, Sunshine, don't worry about it. Just you get your family, just get your stuff taken care of. I'm not worried about the rent right now. And so about 4 or 5 months went by, and I never heard from anybody. So I went over there to see what was going on. I get over there, and the house is empty. And I knew they were good friends with the neighbor. So I went over and asked the neighbor, I said, hey, what is going on? And he says, Mike, you didn't hear? I says, no, I didn't hear. He says, well, he says 3 months after Brian passed away from cancer, his wife got cancer in her leg, and she died. So
what?
Both the husband and wife in their 30s, both had passed away from cancer. And so I went in the house. There was 2 dogs locked up in the house. It was a disaster. So I got the dogs out. We got found homes for them. But I went up in the girls' bedrooms. They had put things on the walls saying, I'm going to miss this house. I'm going to do this, do that. Well, then I found out that there was a CPA investigation that the dad had been molesting the girls. And anyway, so I thought back to how that ghost was always keeping an eye on my son.
Wow.
So I think the dad was not a good man, and that ghost did not like it. And I think he got rid of him.
Wow.
Yeah. How does two people at 30-some years old both die of cancer within months of each other?
I'm stunned at that. That's crazy. And you said, so the girls actually left notes to say, I'm going to miss this house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you said that, and then said, it's like,
I know.
Like maybe the girls like felt like they were being protected or something.
Something, I don't know.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And that just freaked me out because last time I'd owned the house for probably 7 or 8 years, and they were both passed away, and the kids ended up going living with their aunt in California. So I never knew what happened to them after that. And so I just I cleaned the house up, put it on the market, would never rent it again, and eventually I sold it. And I won't even drive by that house now.
Holy moly. That.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Well, I can say this. You were not lying when you said you had a freaky, and I can tell like how emotional you are. I mean, this had to happen, what, 40 years ago?
Yeah, 30 years ago. Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, I can see it's still like, it's got you shook.
Yeah. No, it shook me to the core, dude. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we're not, this is, like I said, this is before you can watch a ghost show on Netflix, I mean, people didn't know, you knew about, a few movies, back in the day about ghosts, but that was like The Exorcist, weird stuff. But nobody ever, Casper the Friendly Ghost that kills people, I never heard of.
No, I mean, wow. Yeah. I'm stunned. Like a part of me would like to talk to these girls and see what happened in that house, but another part of me is like, there's some of that stuff you don't want to, just don't want to talk about. You don't want to think of, because I've got 4 girls.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I cannot even imagine that. I mean,
and the CPS thing about about the possible child abuse, that's just what I heard through a rumor. So I don't even know if it's true or not, but I do know that they're both dead, So,
wow.
Yeah. And I know when my son was there, that ghost never hurt anybody. She just would walk around all night, keeping an eye on my son in the crib, So,
I don't know. I mean, that's a mic drop story right there. No pun intended. Like,
that was a little crazy.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm stunned. I've only ever heard like one story that even remotely comes close to where a ghost, may or may not have done something
and
like
this
that.
Is may not have, but I mean, back in the day, because they were older than me back then, so them, somebody passing away, in their 30s, I didn't really think too much about it. But now that I'm in my 50s, passing away at 35 is really young,
I know, and to have both of them, because then
so quickly. Yes, exactly.
yeah, and you're almost like well, what did she know? And if
Yeah,
I mean, assuming that rumor was true, what did she know and cover up, or was she part of
yeah,
him doing that? I don't know. That's just crazy.
yeah. I don't know. So yeah, anyway, that's my only two major. But yeah, there's yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well, Mike, you win the prize, I guess. This is I think this story is going to shock a lot of people when they get to the end and kind of hear what
Like I said, it still gets to me, those four girls, and just it breaks my heart. I mean, it really does. And I don't think about it very often because it's hard. It's hard to think about.
I can tell. I mean, I can see, it's yeah, I could tell. It's a difficult thing to think about, but wow.
Sorry about the noise in the back. I just rescued some puppies that were in danger of dying, and they get a little anxious when I'm not with them.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, I gotta say, Mike, I appreciate you sharing these stories, and I know I mean I had no idea what was coming in the second one, and like I said, for anybody who's not who's just listening to this and not watching this on YouTube when it comes out, I mean, come watch it on YouTube and you tell me. I mean, it's obvious how upsetting this was to you. I mean, I that was out of. I mean, I can't even. Yeah. So, but I appreciate you sharing that. This is. I almost wish I could save this for Halloween, but this is
a little not quite the Valentine you want, huh?
So, well, hey, Mike, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming back, and I have a feeling this isn't the last time we're going to hear from you.
I guess something else we'll go over with it someday soon. So,
all right. Well, hey, thanks, Mike.
All right, Shane. Talk to you later. All righty. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.